Welcome to the Jasmine Podcast.
So what if I told you that the most exhausting, mentally demanding, completely frustrating thing you'll try to do this entire year is...
Oh, this sounds like a trick question.
It really does. But it's actually just to sit in a comfortable chair and try to do absolutely nothing.
Right, yeah. It sounds like a paradox, honestly.
Totally.
But for the modern human brain, forced inactivity is actually deeply uncomfortable. We're basically conditioned to view stillness as a failure of productivity.
Exactly. And that expectation of constant effort, it really bleeds into everything we do, especially when we decide to learn something new.
Oh, absolutely.
Usually when we talk about learning a language, there's this heavy atmosphere of hard work. You could picture it like climbing a sheer rock face.
Yeah, that's a great visual with a massive heavy backpack weighing you down.
Right, a backpack just filled with complex grammar rules. And you're staring at this terrifyingly long list of new vocabulary words you have to memorize by tomorrow.
And the traditional teacher figure is just standing at the top of the cliff, yelling down, keep climbing, embrace the struggle.
Yeah, exactly.
We have collectively internalized this idea that education requires suffering. We just assume that if we aren't feeling intellectually exhausted from studying, we must not be absorbing anything of value.
Like the friction is the proof of the learning.
Precisely.
But then you step into the world of our source material today, and suddenly that sheer rock face completely disappears.
It really does.
We're looking at a fundamentally different landscape for learning, a landscape that feels more like a quiet garden.
It completely dismantles the traditional high-stress model. It creates a gentle, deeply welcoming environment for the mind to operate in.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we have a very specific mission.
A great mission.
We're exploring a brilliant piece of audio from the Jasmine Podcast. The hosts of that show, Sarah and Mark, put together this episode titled, How to Spend a Great Holiday, specifically Part 1, which is subtitled, The Spirit of Rest.
And we are taking their source material and looking closely at the underlying mechanics of every beautiful idea they shared.
Yeah, and I want to frame this for you, the listener, sitting with us today. You might be walking in the park, commuting to work, or just, relaxing at home.
Or doing chores.
Right, we're doing chores. But if you're listening to this primarily as an English learner, I want to reassure you about the environment we're building here. This deep dive is calibrated specifically for you.
We're keeping things accessible.
Exactly. We are going to maintain a comfortable, unhurried pace.
The vocabulary we highlight today will be clear and highly functional. We're exploring some deep concepts, sure, but we're doing it using accessible language.
Because that creates an optimal state for you to absorb new words.
Right. While we uncover the psychological mechanisms behind human behavior.
So you can permanently drop that heavy backpack of grammar rules. Just let the language wash over you and enjoy the concepts.
Exactly.
So what is the central thesis hidden inside this source material from Sarah and Mark?
Well, the central thesis, the thread connecting their entire dialogue, is a radical redefinition of what a holiday actually is.
Okay.
They argue that a holiday is not a geographic location. It's not a pin on a map, a hotel reservation, or, a plane ticket.
Right.
Instead, a holiday is a specific internal state of mind. And crucially, that state of mind is built and accessed by learning a specific set of vocabulary.
I love that.
We're going to explore the psychology of true rest through the words we use to describe it.
So a holiday is a mental state constructed by language. Let's look at the narrative link they use to introduce this, because they actually demonstrate it before they even explain it.
They do, yeah.
Before Sarah and Mark even begin to give advice on how to rest, the source reveals how simply talking about a holiday immediately alters a person's physiological state.
The opening sequence of their show serves as a live, real-time experiment in human psychology. It's really cool.
Right out of the gate, Mark announces his current state of being, and he uses 3 incredibly light, airy words. He tells Sarah he feels refreshed, he feels happy, and he feels very relaxed.
And those specific adjectives are the antithesis of modern workplace vocabulary, which usually consists of words like stressed, overwhelmed, or behind schedule.
Totally. And Sarah immediately picks up on this shift in his energy. She points out that Mark has this massive smile on his face.
She wonders out loud about the cause, right?
Yeah, she asks him, is it because of the beautiful weather outside? Or is it because of our topic today?
Which is a very logical deduction. I mean, sunlight and pleasant weather reliably boost serotonin levels, leading to a better mood.
Absolutely. But Mark's confirmation of the actual cause is what sets the foundation for our entire analysis today.
Right.
Mark confirms the weather is nice, but the smile is entirely because of the topic. He states that just saying the word holiday out loud makes him feel like he's already on vacation.
The physical syllables leaving his mouth trigger the feeling of the event.
Yeah. It's wild.
What's fascinating here is the underlying neurological mechanism of anticipation. When we talk about anticipation, we're talking about the brain's ability to simulate a future reality.
So his brain is basically pretending it's already on a break.
Exactly. When Mark discusses the concept of a holiday, his prefrontal cortex is essentially running a virtual reality simulation of free time. The brain doesn't completely distinguish between the vivid imagination of a relaxing event and the physical event itself.
Wow.
So it begins signaling the nervous system to stand down. It releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure, simply because the reward is scheduled on the mental horizon.
His mind has already packed its bags and gone to the beach, even while his physical body is still sitting in a chair in front of a microphone.
Right. The cognitive load of his daily obligations just vanishes. The mind begins the biological process of resting long before the physical body actually ceases its labor.
And the source makes a point of clarifying the parameters of this phenomenon, too.
They do.
Sarah specifically mentions that the scale of the event doesn't even matter. She says this feeling applies whether you're planning a long summer vacation or just a short weekend break.
So the duration isn't the active ingredient in this chemical reaction.
Exactly.
The active ingredient, according to the source, is the ownership of time. Whether you have 2 months in the summer or just 48 hours on the weekend, the psychological trigger for that happy, relaxed feeling is simply possessing time that belongs exclusively to you.
Free from external demands.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting regarding the linguistic side of this, if I can float an analogy for a second.
She's due.
Is this phenomenon of anticipation similar to the physical reaction of smelling a rich, complex meal before you're actually allowed to sit down and eat it?
Oh, that is a highly accurate physiological comparison.
Right. Like if you walk into a house and smell fresh bread baking in the oven or, I don't know, garlic sizzling in a pan, you haven't consumed a single calorie. Not what? The food hasn't touched your stomach. Yet your salivary glands activate. Your mouth waters. Your stomach might even rumble.
Yes.
The scent alone prepares your entire digestive system for the experience of eating. The physical machinery turns on before the food even arrives.
And applying that mechanism to language, simply utilizing the vocabulary of a holiday, discussing the abstract concept of free time, prepares your neurological machinery for the experience of resting.
It's like smelling the holiday before you take it.
Precisely. It sends a clear chemical signal to your body that a period of safety and peace is approaching.
Which illuminates a brilliant strategy Sarah mentions for anyone studying English. She suggests that talking about your free time, your hobbies, or your holidays is the absolute best, most effective way to start practicing everyday conversation.
It makes perfect sense now.
It really does. If talking about a holiday forces your brain to release tension and makes you smile, it naturally creates the lowest stress environment possible for practicing a foreign language.
Linguists actually refer to this concept as lowering the affective filter.
The affective filter. Okay, what is that?
The affective filter is essentially an emotional barrier that prevents learning. When a student is anxious, self-conscious, or stressed about making a grammatical error, that filter is raised high.
Yeah.
The brain is in a state of threat, and it blocks the absorption of new linguistic input.
So you literally cannot process the information because your brain is too busy defending itself against the perceived threat of failure.
Exactly. But when you ask a learner to discuss their favorite weekend activities or the concept of a holiday, you activate that dopamine release of anticipation.
And the anxiety drops.
The affective filter lowers, the linguistic pathways open up, and the vocabulary flows with significantly less friction because the mind feels safe.
That's amazing. I mean, it is infinitely easier to recall the English word for beach or park or coffee when your nervous system is relaxed, especially compared to trying to recall the vocabulary for like a quarterly financial audit while your heart rate is elevated.
Oh, definitely. Which is why Sarah and Mark's approach in this audio source is so effective. They understand that before you can discuss the complex logistics of travel or sightseeing, you must establish the emotional and linguistic foundation.
Right. They pivot from the feeling of anticipation to the mechanics of the feeling itself.
They need to anchor the listener. They need the foundational pillar of the entire concept of a holiday.
Which brings us to the second major movement of their discussion. Mastering the profound art and skill of the word relax.
The methodology Sarah uses to introduce this concept is really worth examining. She doesn't just casually toss the word into a sentence. She slows the entire broadcast down.
She actually spells out the word for the listeners.
She does.
She says, let's spell that for our listeners, R-A-L-A-X.
And by breaking the word down into its individual letters, she forces a deceleration in the listener's brain. You cannot rush through a spelling.
Right, you have to take it one letter at a time.
The physical act of pronouncing R, then E, then L, mimics the deceleration required by the definition of the word itself.
It functions as a verbal deep breath.
Yes.
And after establishing the word, she turns to Mark and asks for his personal definition of what relaxing actually entails.
And Mark provides a definition that seems simple on the surface, but requires a massive amount of internal discipline to actually execute.
Yeah, he provides a very holistic view of rest. He states that relaxing requires you to rest your body and your mind. You cannot separate the two.
And he gives a very specific instruction on how to achieve this mental rest. He says you must actively stop the worry about your boss, your homework, or your chores.
Those three specific examples, they are definitely not accidental.
Not at all. They represent the holy trinity of modern human anxiety.
Right. Your boss encapsulates all professional and economic obligations. Your homework covers educational pressures and that constant demand for self-improvement.
And your chores, the laundry, the dishes, the vacuuming, they represent the endless cyclical demands of domestic life.
It's the relentless machinery of things we are obligated to do. And Mark is suggesting that relaxing is the intentional act of throwing a wrench into those gears.
Yes, you have to build a mental fortress.
You have to look at your brain and say, my manager's voice is not allowed inside these walls today. The pile of laundry in the basket is not allowed to exist in my consciousness right now. Actually, wait, I have to push back hard on this idea on behalf of anyone living in the real world.
Please do. It is a highly idealized concept.
Right. I hear Sarah and Mark promoting this idea, but isn't the ability to just ignore your chores a massive privilege?
Oh, without a doubt.
If a listener is working 2 jobs to make rent, or they have a toddler running around screaming, or they're a caregiver for an elderly parent, telling them to just sit in a chair and build a mental wall against their responsibilities might actually induce panic.
It could, yes.
The dishes do not magically wash themselves while you practice the skill of breathing. The rent is still due. For a lot of people, ignoring reality doesn't lower anxiety, it compounds it, because you know the work is just piling up while you sit there.
That is a crucial and completely valid criticism of the modern wellness industry. The instruction to just relax often ignores the socioeconomic realities of the listener.
Exactly.
However, if we look closely at Sarah's response in the source material, she actually addresses the difficulty of this practice. She doesn't frame it as a magical, effortless state. She explicitly labels doing nothing as a skill.
And a skill implies failure, repetition, and practice.
Precisely. By defining it as a skill, she's validating the exact difficulty you just described. True relaxation is not the default state of a responsible adult.
Right, it takes work.
It is an intentional, highly unnatural cognitive override. When you have a mountain of laundry and a demanding job, your brain is wired to keep you in a state of hypervigilance. Overriding that survival mechanism takes profound effort.
So it's not just being lazy.
Not at all.
Well, Mark says his ultimate method for deploying this skill is sitting in a comfortable chair and doing absolutely nothing for 30 minutes. Just breathing. No screams, no input, no productivity.
And which is incredibly hard.
When you think about it, sitting utterly still for 30 minutes in the modern era feels like climbing that sheer rock face we talked about earlier.
It really does. Because we have subjected our nervous systems to a constant deluge of digital stimulation. Our brains are bathed in a steady drip of dopamine from scrolling, checking notifications, and consuming micro-entertainment.
Yeah, we're constantly plugged in.
So if you suddenly sever that supply line and demand that your brain sit in a quiet room for 30 minutes, you will experience psychological withdrawal symptoms. Your brain will panic and scream for input.
You feel that phantom vibration in your pocket?
Yes.
You suddenly feel an overwhelming urge to check the weather in a city you don't even live in, just to give your thumb something to do.
Which is exactly why Sarah emphasizes that the skill of relaxation looks different for different neurological makeups. She points out that while Mark prefers to sit quietly, others need to engage in a fun activity.
She says some people need to play a sport, or paint, or play a game.
This touches on the psychological difference between passive recovery and active recovery.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Sitting in a chair is passive recovery, which works for some. But for someone whose anxiety spikes when they sit still, perhaps the person with the 2 jobs and the mountain of chores you mentioned, they might need active recovery.
Oh, I see.
They need to occupy their conscious mind with a low-stakes, joyful activity, like painting or playing tennis. The activity distracts the brain's worry centers, allowing the background nervous system to finally power down.
So the ultimate goal isn't necessarily physical stillness, it's a departure from the landscape of obligation.
Yes. The mind rests when it is no longer being chased by a deadline.
Well, if doing nothing in a chair for 30 minutes is the daytime test of this skill, the ultimate proving ground for the concept of a holiday happens the moment you open your eyes.
Ah, yeah.
Which brings us to a critical transition in their dialogue.
The architecture of the morning.
Exactly. In the source material, Sarah introduces what might be my favorite English phrasal verb of all time. She says the absolute best way to initiate a holiday is to sleep in.
A vital piece of vocabulary for anyone seeking rest.
Mark ensures the definition is crystal clear. He defines sleeping in as the deliberate act of staying in bed much later than your usual schedule dictates. And to ground this abstract idea, he provides the raw data of his own life.
The contrasting metrics highlight the severity of the shift.
He tells the audience that on a standard day of professional obligation, he wakes up at 6:00 a.m. It's early, it's dark, it requires discipline. But on a holiday, he says he sleeps in until 10:00 a.m.
That's a 4-hour displacement of his circadian rhythm.
And Sarah is visibly shocked by this revelation in the audio. She marvels at his ability to do this, noting, "Wow, Mark, you really know how to enjoy a holiday."
She's impressed.
Very. She confesses that her own version of sleeping in only pushes the clock to 9:000. But whether it's 9:00 or 10:00, the extra hours are achieved by eliminating the primary antagonist of modern existence.
The mechanical dictator of the bedroom.
The alarm clock.
Right.
Sarah describes the function of this machine vividly. She mimics the sound, the loud, sudden beep, 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 that shatters the morning. You can almost feel the cortisol spike just listening to her describe it.
That's an awful sound.
It really is an artificial noise designed specifically to rip your consciousness out of a sleep cycle before your biology is actually ready to wake up.
The historical context of the alarm clock is relevant here, actually. Before the Industrial Revolution, human beings largely woke up according to the sun and their own internal circadian rhythms.
Oh, right, because of farming and daylight?
Exactly. The alarm clock became necessary only when we needed to synchronize thousands of human bodies to work in factories at the exact same moment.
Wow.
The alarm clock is quite literally the sound of industrial obligation invading your private sanctuary.
So when Sarah declares that on a holiday we turn it off, she's describing an act of rebellion. She says that turning off that machine results in what she poetically calls the most beautiful silence in the world.
The contrast between the violent beep, beep, beep and that beautiful silence represents the reclaiming of biological autonomy.
Mark responds to this concept with an analogy in the source text. He says that throwing away the alarm clock and sleeping in gives your body rest, and it acts like charging your phone battery, but for your soul.
The old phone battery metaphor.
Yeah, and I understand what Mark is getting at here.
Okay.
We all know the visceral panic of looking at our phone and seeing the red battery icon at 5%.
Oh, the worst feeling.
We rush to plug it in and leave it untouched on a table so it can revive. But honestly, comparing the human soul to a smartphone battery feels a bit reductive to me.
It is a common modern idiom, but you are right. It limits the scope of what is actually happening. The battery metaphor implies a simple transactional energy exchange. You plug it in, you fill it up, you unplug it to use it again.
Right, it's very utilitarian.
I think a far more accurate analogy for sleeping in without an alarm clock would involve the mechanics of an engine.
Oh, how so?
Consider an engine governor. A governor is a mechanical device installed in certain vehicles or machines to physically restrict their top speed, or to force them to run at a specific mandated RPM regardless of what the engine actually needs.
Okay, I'll let you.
In our daily lives, the schedule, the alarm clock, the train timetable, the 9:00 a.m. meeting acts as a societal governor on our biological engine. It forces us to operate at a highly specific, rigid pace.
You are constantly checking the clock to ensure you aren't failing to meet the required RPMs of the day.
Exactly. When Mark talks about the joy of having no schedule and sleeping in, he isn't just recharging a battery. He is taking the governor off the engine.
That's a great way to look at it.
When you wake up in that beautiful silence, without an alarm, you are allowing your body's natural circadian rhythm to find its own idle speed. You wake up simply because the biological process of resting is complete, not because an external machine demanded your labor.
It is a profound psychological release from the chronological architecture of a Tuesday.
A wonderful phrase, the chronological architecture, the grid of obligations.
Yeah, you mentioned the schedule earlier, and I look at my own calendar. Well, it's a grid. It's tiny boxes of obligation.
Always.
6.15 train, 8:00 a.m. desk, 12:00 p.m. lunch for exactly 60 minutes. Breaking out of that grid feels almost illegal. The beautiful silence Sarah describes is the sound of that grid dissolving.
And that dissolution requires a dramatic shift in how you move through space once you finally do get out of bed.
Which carries us into the next phase of their discussion. You have successfully slept in until 9:30 a.m. You are awake. How do you govern your behavior for the remaining 14 hours of the day? Sarah introduces an idiom that dictates this behavior. She says a successful holiday requires you to take it easy.
Take it easy. A remarkably common piece of English vocabulary, carrying immense philosophical weight.
Sarah defines the idiom purely by what it is not. She says take it easy means you do not rush.
And Mark eagerly expands on this, stating that it is the exact polar opposite of being busy.
And to ensure the listeners grasp the magnitude of this shift, he utilizes contrast.
Contrast is highly effective for clarifying abstract concepts.
Mark first paints a verbal portrait of busy. He quotes the frantic, desperate phrases we shout in our daily lives. Phrases like, I'm late for work, or I have to finish this report.
Those phrases are drenched in the language of urgency and scarcity. Time is running out, and the speaker is failing to keep up.
But then he pivots to the physical manifestation of taking it easy. He offers 3 specific, highly visual examples of what this idiom looks like when performed in reality. First, he says, we walk slowly in the park. Second, we sit on the balcony and watch the birds. And Sarah adds that we drink our coffee slowly.
Let's analyze the intention behind those actions. Walking slowly in a park is a rejection of destination. You are not walking to arrive at an appointment. The act of walking is the entirety of the goal.
It's the journey, not the destination.
Exactly. Sitting on a balcony watching birds is the practice of passive observation, requiring zero intervention or management on your part. And drinking coffee slowly shifts the beverage from a functional stimulant required for labor into a sensory experience enjoyed purely for its taste.
But the linchpin of this entire sequence, the rule that makes the slow walking and the slow coffee possible, is Mark's final observation. He says, crucially, we don't look at our watches.
The physical cessation of time tracking. This is the cornerstone of taking it easy.
Why does the simple act of looking at a piece of metal on your wrist or checking the lock screen on your phone destroy the state of rest?
Because the act of checking the time is never neutral. In our daily lives, looking at a watch is an automatic reflex used to measure our progress against that rigid grid of obligations we discussed.
Right.
When you check the time, you are inherently judging the present moment based on how much time is left before the next moment must begin.
Like, am I enjoying this coffee too slowly? Do I have enough minutes left to watch this bird before I need to leave for the airport?
Yes. The moment you introduce measurement, you introduce urgency. When Mark states, we don't look at our watches, he is describing the physical mechanism required to fulfill Sarah's overarching instruction to enjoy the moment.
It makes total sense.
If you deliberately blind yourself to the passage of time, you cannot be late. You cannot fall behind schedule because the schedule no longer exists. It is a deliberate psychological expansion of the present tense.
I want to pause and reflect on the specific vocabulary Sarah and Mark deployed in this section. Sitting on a balcony. Watching a bird. Walking in a park. Drinking coffee slowly.
Very simple words.
For the English learner listening to their podcast, these actions utilize the most foundational, basic English words imaginable. Bird, coffee, walk, slow.
They are generally among the first 100 words a beginner learns.
Exactly. They are simple words. But what strikes me is that these incredibly simple words are being used to describe a highly advanced, elusive state of mental peace.
That's a beautiful point.
It reveals something profound about the human experience. You do not need complex, multi-syllabic academic jargon to describe a perfect day. The absolute pinnacle of human contentment, resting, observing, breathing, is articulated using the simplest, most elementary language we possess.
That is a deeply resonant observation. The simplicity of the linguistic structure mirrors the simplicity of the desired physiological state. Complexity and jargon are required to navigate the stressful, artificial world of commerce and industry. But basic, elemental language is sufficient for biological peace.
And having thoroughly explored this elemental language, having mapped the geography of relax, sleep in, and take it easy, we arrive at the philosophical conclusion of our source material. We have to examine why Sarah and Mark felt an urgent need to broadcast this specific lesson.
Right. What's the context?
What is the underlying crisis they are addressing?
They are responding to a systemic failure in how modern society approaches recovery.
Mark outlines a tragic reality. He notes that many people work intensely hard, they wait far too long to schedule a holiday, and as a direct consequence, they literally forget how to relax.
The mental muscles required for stillness atrophy from lack of use.
Which is terrifying.
It's a recognized psychological phenomenon. When an individual operates in a state of chronic low-grade stress for 50 weeks a year, their baseline neurological state shifts. Anxiety becomes the default setting.
Wow.
So when they are finally granted 2 weeks of freedom, their brain does not know how to shut off the alarm system.
And because people allow themselves to reach this point of absolute exhaustion, they fall for a common illusion. They believe they need a massive, wildly expensive, highly complicated trip across the globe to cure their burnout.
Yes, the grand vacation cure.
But Mark introduces a modern piece of English vocabulary to counter this dangerous illusion. He introduces the word staycation.
Staycation is a brilliant linguistic creation. It's a portmanteau, which is a word formed by blending the sounds and meanings of two different words. In this case, stay and vacation.
Sarah defines it for the audience immediately. She explains that a staycation is simply a holiday where you stay at home.
It is a profound conceptual pivot.
So what does this all mean for the listener? When we aggregate all these insights, the loss of the skill of relaxation, the danger of overwork, the introduction of the staycation, what is the practical, actionable takeaway from Sarah and Mark's lesson?
The takeaway is that we must actively prioritize and practice the mechanics of rest, and we must do so to protect our psychological integrity.
Sarah makes this explicit. She states, "It's so important for our mental health."
The source is quietly dismantling a massive societal myth. The idea that geographic displacement is required for biological rest. You do not need a passport, a boarding pass, or a hotel reservation to access the spirit of rest.
You literally just need to turn off the alarm clock and stare at a bird from your balcony.
This raises an important question about how we allocate our energy. Are we, as a culture, prioritizing the performance of travel over the biological necessity of rest?
That is a phenomenal question, because if we are honest, the act of traveling is often an intensely stressful logistical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. Consider the reality of a major vacation. You are panicked about packing, you navigate the chaotic infrastructure of an airport, you endure a cramped flight.
Dealing with delays, lost luggage.
Right. You arrive in a foreign city with a different language and unfamiliar transit systems. And then, driven by the pressure to maximize the expensive trip, you create a brutal schedule, trying to view every museum and consume every famous meal in a 72-hour window.
You are constantly looking at your watch. You are rushing. You are doing the exact opposite of taking it easy.
Exactly.
And by the time you fly back home, you are physically depleted. You need a holiday to recover from your holiday.
The cognitive dissonance of vacation exhaustion is very real, and the overarching structure of Sarah and Mark's podcast series demonstrates their deep understanding of this trap.
This is a brilliant structural detail, actually. Mark mentions at the very end of our source material that they're just getting started with this topic. He teases the next episode, saying there is so much more to discuss regarding traveling, food, and sightseeing.
Sarah specifically notes that part 2 of their series will feature an interview with their friend Lily.
Yes, Lily recently took a trip to Italy, and Mark expresses his excitement to hear the stories about the beautiful architecture she saw and the amazing pasta she ate. That upcoming episode represents the external geographical aspect of a holiday.
But the genius of their pedagogical design is what they chose not to do.
They deliberately did not start their series with Lily's glamorous trip to Italy.
No, they did not lead with the spectacle.
They intentionally dedicated Part 1, the foundational episode, entirely to the concept of simply resting inside your own home. They prioritized the staycation. They established the internal neurological state of mind before they ever mentioned an external travel destination.
It is a masterful sequence of information. They are implicitly arguing that you must master the mechanics of rest before you can possibly extract any joy from a trip.
Because you're already empty.
Right. If your biological engine is completely burnt out, dragging your exhausted body across an ocean to stand in front of a Roman monument will not cure you. You will simply be exhausted in Italy instead of being exhausted in your living room.
You have to relearn the skill of doing absolutely nothing before you can possess the energy required to do something new.
The internal architecture of RELAX must be fully constructed before you pack a suitcase.
That is an incredibly powerful framework to operate from. We have journeyed through a massive amount of psychological and linguistic territory today, all originating from a deceptively simple conversation designed for English learners. We've really excavated the true meaning behind the vocabulary of rest.
Let us synthesize those core concepts to ensure they remain accessible to the listener.
Yes, let's trace our steps back through the specific vocabulary we explored. First, we confronted the word relax, and we dismantled the myth that doing nothing is laziness. We learned that intentionally stopping the worry about chores and obligations is an active, demanding skill.
A skill that requires immense cognitive discipline to execute in a society addicted to digital stimulation.
Second, we examined the mechanics of the phrasal verb sleep in. We saw how silencing the harsh beep, beep, beep of the alarm clock removes the governor from our biological engine, releasing us from the rigid, chronological architecture of daily life.
It facilitates the return to our natural rhythm, surrounded by that beautiful silence.
Third, we broke down the idiom take it easy, which serves as a mandate for a slow physical pace. We learned that the deliberate choice to stop looking at your watch removes the anxiety of time tracking, expanding the present moment so you can finally just exist.
You regain the capacity to slowly drink your coffee and passively observe the world.
And finally, we highlighted the profound mental health implications of a staycation. The empowering realization that the spirit of rest is not a luxury product you have to purchase with a plane ticket. It is a state of mind available right now inside your own home.
It democratizes the concept of recovery, making it universally accessible.
And to you, the listener, who sat with us through this extensive deep dive, I want to acknowledge the work you did today. You spent this time absorbing complex ideas, tracking a detailed English conversation, and expanding your comprehension.
But I hope the environment we maintained allowed your effective filter to remain low.
Me too. I hope you felt that we kept our promise of an unhurried, comfortable pace.
We made a conscious effort to practice the philosophy we were analyzing. We took it easy.
We did. And as you walk away with these specific terms, anticipation, relax, sleep in, take it easy, staycation, know that you are doing far more than memorizing vocabulary for a language proficiency test. You are actively acquiring the linguistic tools necessary to protect your own nervous system. You are learning the language of peace.
The vocabulary you choose to employ dictates the reality your brain perceives. If you consistently utilize the language of rest, your physiological state will inevitably follow suit.
It has been a deeply fulfilling, genuinely relaxing exploration of this source material. But before we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final, lingering concept to carry with you.
Yes. Taking all the psychological mechanics and vocabulary we unpacked today, I want you to run a mental simulation for yourself.
Imagine that you decide to declare tomorrow an impromptu absolute staycation.
Imagine making the deliberate physical choice tonight to disable every single alarm clock in your home.
Under those conditions, when your biological engine finally wakes you up entirely on its own schedule, what is the very first, delightfully slow, entirely unproductive activity you would choose to do in that beautiful, hard-earned silence?